doing today?
Good, Joe. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. Sorry if you hear a lot of background, probably a child running around the household.
Nice.
So, Paul, today we're going to be talking about the Webby nomination for Unsinkable, and the audio movie series. How excited are you for that nomination?
I'm so happy for the whole production. This was a total labor of love for John Mawson and Misha Crosby, and to see it go from them like just forcing it to happen during COVID just by sheer, strength of will to just, get everybody together and do it. So all this time later, have it be recognized, have it be a success, and have it be nominated, not just for the Webbies, but they're up for all kinds of awards. I'm just really, really proud and happy for them. And also, it doesn't do any harm for me. Like it's just very lovely news to wake up and see these nominations and to see my name next to John Malkovich and Brian Cox and all the gang. It's very cool.
And how was it that you were approached to this project? Because usually these type of projects are very probably for video games or like a small web series or whatnot, but this was for like a full length film but in audio. How were you approached to this project?
Well, I had worked with Misha. We made a film together. It's been out for, it was just the 5 year anniversary of that film's release yesterday, which is just crazy how time is marching on. But we had worked together on a couple of short films and also on that feature. And I had met John Mawson, the writer producer of the production, a few times as well, just through the how it goes in LA, working on various productions and meeting friends of friends, and I already had a lot of respect for both of them. But I have to say, when Misha approached me during the pandemic, saying, "Hey mate, I have this little project I want to have a look at," I didn't think anything of it, and I think he had to nag me to look at it again. I think I was just, "Oh, I'll get to it," because it was the pandemic and nothing was happening. There's no rush. I felt. So he nagged me. He's like, "Will you please look at that email I sent you?" And I opened it up and I felt really bad because I was like, "Oh, what?" Like, usually on a production like this, I would be one of the people that would be approached relatively early in the process. But instead, I was coming to it once he already had some people cast, and the people he had cast were Brian Cox and John Malkovich. And I was like, how did you do this? What's going on? And so I immediately read the script and like read all about my character, and I was like, yes, yes, whatever you need, just tell me where to be, and I'll be there. I had done a fair amount of, as you mentioned, like video games and pretty big ones like Call of Duty, and so I had some voiceover experience in a kind of high end, high budget, audio production essentially, which is what a video game is, at least on the acting side of things. And so I had some sense of like how it might go. But I have to say, the actual production of this was just so much more enjoyable and so much more fun than my experience on video games. Just because the nature of the writing and the true story, and it just felt way more like a just an equivalent acting job um, to any of the movies I had done. Whereas like video games, because it's all chopped up and you have to do well. If the character goes this way, you say this. If he goes that way, you say that. It's just a different type of storytelling, and doesn't. It's just less emotive, I would say. Whereas this was full of emotion, full of meaning, and just a really important story to be a part of telling. So yeah, it's just a really exciting proposition.
And what is the major difference? You just mentioned on how was your experience with the Call of Duty, but how about that in this particular project? I imagine that the only thing you had were like probably scenes created on uh on a digital text, and you didn't have like a visual aspect of it.
Right.
How was it how different was it working? Because in video games you at least have like the scene moving forward, and this
Yeah.
time you only have text. How was that
Yeah.
for you?
Well, so for instance, in Call of Duty, there are all these production assets everywhere you look. You'll be brought over, they'll rehearse a day ahead of time for each sequence that they'll do. And you go in and they'd have, on all the computer screens would have like mock-ups of the sets, isn't what they call them, maps, obviously, but the set, so you could see where you would be, you could see what your character would be wearing, you could see the weather, you could see this, you could see that. But by the time you go to, like a video game kind of has, depending on your role, it has kind of like two levels to it. One would be just the voice, where you're in the booth, just, doing all kinds of dialogue and also reactions and grunts and like, oh, I got shot, like all that kind of stuff. So it's all very disjointed. But the other side of video game acting, if you're in a large role, would be the performance capture, where you go into a full-on performance capture volume, and you basically are creating a digital character. Like it was funny when I did it, when I did Call of Duty, we shot in the exact same stages where they did Avatar and used a lot of the same technology and had some of the same assistant directors. So that was just really exciting on the film geek side of things. But also, with all of that, you are just like the people in Avatar were having, the actors in Avatar were having to pretend to be like 8 foot tall blue cat aliens. You in Call of Duty would have to pretend to be like this tough guy soldier, but you're wearing a leotard and you've got a little plastic gun. And so there's the first few hours of each day was just like fighting against feeling silly. So you can just be relaxed and feel like you're a badass, soldier covered in weaponry and armor. Um, so that's the biggest difference, I would say, between any kind of screen acting or performance capture acting versus what we did on Unsinkable. Is that Unsinkable is just my voice, so it's this very pure, um, undistracted form of acting. Like you'd think it'd be much more difficult because you don't have you don't have the boats, you don't have the sea, you don't have the wind, blowing rain into your face and all of that. But sometimes those things, obviously that's very useful in a feature film to have all that happening. It takes the acting away, and you just have to endure it. But on the video game equivalent of that, I would have to just create all of that in my imagination and somehow try and physicalize it. Whereas when it's just my voice, I've talked about it to the other actors that were on Unsinkable, and everybody had a similar kind of thing happen where at a certain point you just kind of like close your eyes and you're just using your imagination, and you're very fortunate to have the writer right there in front of you. Like John himself was a merchant marine, so he has this like really intimate knowledge of what it's like to go through the things that the people in the story went through. So any questions you could just, you had this resource right in front of you, but the rest of it, it just allowed you to just go back all the way back to almost that like childlike acting that you do in high school, or when you're first not even acting, like just playing pretend. Do you know what I mean? Just getting back to this like really pure core of what acting is. And to do it without any distractions. There's no boom operator, fiddling around, half looking at his phone. There's no ads like trying to decide what everybody's having for lunch. You're just there, and you're able to like have a level of concentration, undistracted concentration, that is, I would say, is almost impossible to achieve on a film set. So that was really, really cool, because now that the show is out and it's getting nominations and all this recognition, it's funny because so many times when I think about the scenes in my memory, it's like we were there. It's like we were on the boat and we were out at sea. It sounds silly and over the top, but it really did, like it's almost as if your brain tricks your memory
Hmm.
into having actually have done some of these things. I'm not saying I feel like I was McNeil and I was on the San Dimitro when it was the song. It's more that I feel like as an actor, I remember being on like a stage that was like a boat, and I don't know, it was just all very convincing at the time. And I don't, part of that was probably because we did it during the pandemic and nobody was working, and we were all just so glad to have something to do that we just, really dug in and felt it so deeply. But it is a funny little sensation to to know that you weren't on a boat, but your memory is going, but were you? Maybe you were. So that was the biggest difference, like the kind of purity and kind of intimacy of the not just the acting, but of the way the acting was recorded and achieved.
That's that amazing, the amazing comparison, amazing story.
Yeah.
And Paul, I wanted to ask, do you think that being the fact that Unsinkable has become so successful, do you think that there is a big chance that some production companies may lean on to make movies like this that are only audio and the imagination of the in this case not viewer but listener?
Oh, I think there's a huge opportunity here for all kinds of stories to be told this way. Ultimately, radio plays, um, like the show I'm on at the moment, Days of Our Lives, started as a radio show. It did that for I think 4 or 5 years before it shifted to TV. There's a show that I'm obsessed with at the moment. It's an old American TV Western called Gunsmoke, and that started as a radio show, and in fact ran concurrently. The radio show was running at the same time that the TV show was running, and they kind of diverged and became quite different. The radio show was a bit darker, and the TV show was still heavy for the time, but nowhere near as kind of edgy as the radio show was allowed to be. And what that kind of tells you is that there's something you can do in pure audio where the audience is really having to like meet you halfway and fill in all the gaps. All you're giving them is the sound, but the audience is going to fill in the visual. The audience is going to fill in the smell. The audience is going to fill in, just the every other part of the trick that is required for fiction to work. But if you provide, this depth of sound that is so immersive, it does something that even a movie can't do. It's more almost like a novel where there's something that goes on in your brain when you read a good novel and you just get lost in it, and your brain is making the pictures and making the sounds and making the smells all for you. So it's kind of like that. And so I can totally imagine it's irresponsible to watch a TV show while you're driving to work. But if you're a big Marvel fan, I can totally imagine, just popping on, a Tony Stark audio movie that's a different story to the movies that have been made, or an adaptation of Jane Austen, or Cormac McCarthy that's just done in. If it was done in the same like fidelity, like the effort towards creating a truly immersive world, I think it would work with almost any kind of storytelling.
That's amazing. And do you think that there would be a chance to see Unsinkable probably in an actual show setting, from audio to an actual TV show?
Well, I know that that's definitely a big ambition for John and Misha. They're behind it. And one of the things that's interesting is, I was talking about Gunsmoke. I was reading interviews with the creators of that show, and they held off on turning it into a TV show because they were worried that it would be that TV would be too small. Which when I read it, I was like, huh? Because usually you think of radio being a radio being smaller than television. That TV. You've got the sets, you've got the actors, you've got the sound. It's bigger, but in terms of like what you can achieve, like what the effect that you can achieve, sorry, on an audience. Well, for the radio play version of Gunsmoke, it was much easier for them to give a sense of a vast Dodge City that was full of people. Whereas when you do a TV show, all of a sudden, well, you have to point the camera at a city and have all these extras walking around, which is really expensive, and so it becomes limiting in a way. And so that's the thing that's so cool with Unsinkable is that it's this epic World War II action adventure, heroic tale of daring do with great drama. To make a movie of it, to make a TV show of it, would cost millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And that's not to say they shouldn't do it, but as a first, attempt to tell this story the way it needs to be told in the scale that it needs to be told, this was a really great way to do it. I can only, I genuinely hope, regardless of my continued involvement with it or not, that the lads do manage to get it on the screen. Um, just because it's funny because obviously in my head, I feel like I've seen some of these scenes because I had to imagine them while we were acting them. But there is a part of me that would love to just sit back and watch the story unfold. There's a couple of the just very quickly, the core of the story is about a merchant marine vessel that's attacked, assumed lost, and the survivors managed to get to a lifeboat and survive the night under incredibly difficult and dangerous circumstances, only to be like paddling around the next day, just trying to work out how to survive in the middle of the ocean when they see a boat. And they get close to the boat and realize it's their own boat from the night before that they thought was sunk, but has not sunk, but is still on fire. And so somehow they have to get from the lifeboat onto the boat, fix the boat, and try and navigate back home. So it's just very visual. Like that could be very cool to see. So yeah, I really hope they make it happen.
That's amazing, Paul. Thank you so much for giving us the time to talk about Unsinkable and the Webby nomination and as well your experience with the project. And I hope to see you in another project and probably meet you in person. So thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, John. I'd love that too. Thanks
Thank
so
you
much.
very much. Bye bye.